The emergency distress signal stopped exactly at midnight. Lieutenant Marcus Webb stood at the edge of the Cambodian jungle, staring at the coordinates on his tactical display. The signal had been broadcasting for 72 hours from a cargo vessel that should have been 200 miles out at sea. But the ship wasn't at sea. It was here. In the jungle. Half a mile inland from any water source. And when Marcus and his team approached through the suffocating darkness, machetes cutting through vines thick as cables, they saw it a massive container ship, its hull caked in mud and vegetation, sitting upright in a clearing as if the ocean had simply vanished beneath it. The ship's name was painted in fading letters across the bow, the Persephone. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was that the ship had been reported lost at sea in 1987. 37 years ago. And according to maritime records, everyone aboard had died. Yet someone or something had just sent a distress signal from its bridge. As Marcus raised his night vision goggles to scan the deck, he saw them. Footprints. Fresh. Leading up the gangway. But they weren't human footprints. They had too many toes. The emergency distress signal stopped exactly at midnight. Lieutenant Marcus Webb stood at the edge of the Cambodian jungle, staring at the coordinates on his tactical display. The signal had been broadcasting for 72 hours from a cargo vessel that should have been 200 miles out at sea. But the ship wasn't at sea. It was here. In the jungle. Half a mile inland from any water source. And when Marcus and his team approached through the suffocating darkness, machetes cutting through vines thick as cables, they saw it a massive container ship, its hull caked in mud and vegetation, sitting upright in a clearing as if the ocean had simply vanished beneath it. The ship's name was painted in fading letters across the bow, the Persephone. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was that the ship had been reported lost at sea in 1987. 37 years ago. And according to maritime records, everyone aboard had died. Yet someone or something had just sent a distress signal from its bridge. As Marcus raised his night vision goggles to scan the deck, he saw them. Footprints. Fresh. Leading up the gangway. But they weren't human footprints. They had too many toes. Introduction: the year was 2024, and the world had grown comfortable with its monsters. Terrorism. Cartels. Cyber warfare. These were threats that could be understood, categorized, prepared for. But what Marcus Webb was about to encounter aboard the Persephone would shatter every assumption he'd built during 15 years as a Navy SEAL. His team, call sign Phantom 6, had been deployed on a black operation to investigate reports of weapons trafficking through the Golden Triangle. The distress signal was a deviation, an anomaly that Command almost ignored. Almost, but there was something about the signal itself that troubled the analysts back at base. It wasn't broadcasting on any standard frequency. It was using a naval code that had been discontinued in 1986. 1 year before the Persephone vanished. And the message, when finally decrypted, contained only 7 words: they came from the water. Still here. Help. Marcus had seen his share of psychological operations and elaborate traps. But as he stood before that impossible ship, vegetation growing through its railings, rust bleeding down its sides like old wounds, he felt something he hadn't experienced since his first combat deployment. Pure, primal fear. The jungle around them had gone completely silent. No insects. No birds. Nothing. Just the sound of 6 operators breathing and the distant groan of metal settling in the humid night. Marcus checked his weapon one final time and gave the signal. They were going aboard. They were going to find out what sent that message. And in exactly 47 minutes, Marcus Webb would make a discovery that would force the United States military to quarantine 60 square miles of Cambodian jungle and classify everything that happened that night under a security clearance that officially doesn't exist. Before we continue the story, if you're enjoying this mystery and want to hear more terrifying tales of the unknown, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. Now, let's find out what Marcus discovered in the darkness of that ship. The gangway groaned under their weight as Phantom 6 ascended to the main deck. Marcus went first, his rifles mounted light cutting through the darkness like a surgical blade. The smell hit them immediately, not decay, which they'd expected, but something else. Something chemical and organic at once, like formaldehyde mixed with seawater, and something underneath that Marcus's brain refused to identify. The deck was a graveyard of shipping containers, many split open, their contents long since consumed by the jungle. Vines had invaded everything, creating a surreal fusion of industrial metal and organic growth, as if the ship were being slowly digested by the rainforest itself. "Command, Phantom 6 actual," Marcus whispered into his radio. "We're on the deck. Ship appears abandoned. Heavy vegetation overgrowth. No signs of recent habitation." But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. Those footprints on the gangway had been fresh. Something was here. Something was watching. His second in command, Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, moved up beside him. "Sir, you seeing this?" Rodriguez pointed to the containers. Every single one had been opened from the inside. The locks hadn't been cut or shot off. The metal had been peeled back, bent outward with tremendous force, as if whatever was inside had simply decided to leave, and the steel was no more substantial than aluminum foil. They advanced toward the bridge superstructure, moving in practiced formation. The ship's windows were dark, but Marcus could see something moving behind the glass on the bridge level. Shadows that seemed too fluid, too graceful to be human. His heart rate elevated. His finger found the trigger guard of his rifle. Contact possible. Bridge level. Moving shadows. The door to the interior corridor stood open. Beyond it, emergency lighting flickered in a pattern that seemed almost deliberate. 3 quick flashes, 2 slow, 3 quick. SOS. Someone inside was signaling. But Marcus's training warred with his instincts. This felt wrong. Every operator on his team could feel it. The way the shadows moved. The way the ship seemed to breathe around them. The way their radio communications kept cutting out, replaced by a sound like whale song played backward. They entered the corridor. The walls were covered in something that looked like dried salt deposits but moved slightly when their lights passed over it, contracting like living tissue. Rodriguez reached out to touch it. "Don't," Marcus commanded. Something in his gut told him that substance was more dangerous than any weapon they'd trained against. They climbed the metal stairs to the bridge level. Each footstep echoed through the ship in ways that didn't make acoustic sense, the sounds returning to them distorted and delayed. On the second level landing, they found the first body. Or what remained of one. The uniform was U.S. Navy. The name tape read Harrison. According to the manifest from 1987, Captain James Harrison had been the commanding officer of the Persephone. But the body wasn't 37 years old. It looked fresh. Days old at most. And it was positioned in a way that was impossible, folded in on itself, limbs bent at angles that defied human skeletal structure, arranged in a pattern that Marcus's mind kept trying to interpret as something meaningful. A warning. Or an invitation. Jesus Christ, whispered Peterson, the team's youngest member. What did this? Marcus didn't answer because he'd just seen the logbook clutched in the corpse's hand. He carefully extracted it, the leather cover still supple, the pages inside filled with handwriting that became increasingly erratic toward the end. The final entry was dated yesterday. Marcus read it aloud, his voice barely audible. Day 13,542 of our voyage. They keep us alive to operate the beacon. We take turns dying and being renewed. The things in the cargo hold have learned to mimic us perfectly now. They wear our faces while we sleep. Tonight, they said they're ready to go ashore. They asked me to send the signal. They promised if I did, they'd let us finally die. I'm so tired. I'm sending it. God forgive me. To whoever finds this, they came from Challenger Deep. We were transporting mineral samples. We didn't know they were alive. We didn't know they could learn. Don't let them reach the entry ended in a smear of dried blood. The lights went out. All of them simultaneously. The emergency lighting. Their weapon-mounted flashlights. Even the infrared lasers on their rifles. Complete darkness. And in that darkness, Marcus heard it. Breathing. But not from his team. From everywhere at once. From the walls. From the ceiling. From the very metal of the ship itself. Then, a voice. His voice. Speaking to him from somewhere ahead in the perfect darkness. Marcus, it said, using his own tone, his own inflection, his own slight Texas accent. Marcus, you need to see what we've become. You need to understand what's possible when something from 4 miles below the surface learns what it means to be human. We've been practicing for 37 years. We're so much better at being you than you are. The light snapped back on. Standing at the end of the corridor, illuminated in harsh fluorescent light, were 6 figures in Navy SEAL tactical gear. Marcus looked at them. Then he looked at his team beside him. Then back at the figures ahead. They were identical. Perfect copies. Down to the scuff mark on Rodriguez's helmet. Down to the custom grip tape on Peterson's rifle. Down to the small tear in Marcus's own uniform from where he'd caught it on razor wire during insertion. The copies smiled. All of them. At exactly the same moment. And their smiles were too wide. Too many teeth. Teeth that were too sharp and too numerous and arranged in concentric rows that went back impossibly far into throats that were too deep and too dark. We've been waiting for more of you, the Marcus copy said. The 6 of us weren't enough. We need to practice more variations. More voices. More faces. More of humanity's beautiful complexity. It took a step forward. The metal deck beneath its boot didn't make the right sound. It made a wet, organic sound, as if the copy weighed far more than it should, as if it were made of something much denser than flesh and bone. At once. One every few weeks. And each time, security footage shows them walking off base alone at midnight, moving in perfect formation, like they're being called to something. Like they're going home. And in each case, exactly 7 days before they disappeared, their commanding officers received an encrypted message containing only 7 words, they came from the water. Still here. Help. The next transmission is expected in 48 hours. And this time, the coordinates place it somewhere much closer to home.